Welcome to Conspiracy Files. I'm your host, Zoe Parker, and in today's episode, we're diving into a conspiracy that doesn't just surround you, it shapes you. It determines what you believe, what you fear, and even what you think is real. What if I told you that everything you see in the news, on social media, or even in entertainment isn't just information, but manipulation? That behind the headlines, the breaking news alerts, and the carefully crafted narratives, there are unseen forces controlling the way you perceive reality itself. Is the media an independent watchdog of truth, or is it a tool for those in power to control the masses? Let's find out. Stay tuned.
Legendary reliability, excellent resale value. Check out Toyota's amazing lineup of affordable SUVs, like an adventure-ready RAV4 or spacious Grand Highlander. Visit buyatoyota.com for more. Toyota, let's go places.
By the time I hit my 50s, I'd learned a few things, like how family is precious. Work can always wait. And 99% of people over 50 already have the virus that causes shingles. Not everyone at risk will develop it, but I did. The painful, blistering rash disrupted my life for weeks. Don't learn about your shingles risk the hard way. Talk to your doctor or pharmacist today. Sponsored by GSK.
The idea that the media could manipulate reality isn't something that sprang up overnight. Its roots run deep, tracing back through centuries of political power struggles, technological advances, and cultural shifts. To understand why so many people question the integrity of mainstream media, it's important to look at the historical forces that have shaped the way information is shared and controlled. The concept of controlling the narrative is as old as civilization itself. Ancient rulers understood the importance of shaping public perception. From pharaohs carving inscriptions into temple walls to emperors issuing decrees, information was carefully curated to maintain control and project power. Fast forward to the invention of the printing press in the 15th century, and the game changed entirely. For the first time, information could be disseminated quickly and on a massive scale. With that came an unprecedented ability to influence not just local communities, but entire nations. Governments were quick to seize on this potential. Throughout history, they've used propaganda to rally support, suppress dissent, and control public opinion. In wartime, particularly during the 20th century, propaganda campaigns became a powerful weapon. Both Allied and Axis powers during World War II leveraged media to frame their enemies as evil and their causes as just. Leaflets, radio broadcasts, and newsreels became tools of influence, proving that whoever controlled the message controlled the narrative. By the mid-20th century, the rise of television brought information into people's homes in a way that was previously unimaginable. News anchors became trusted voices of authority, and the lines between journalism and storytelling began to blur. However, this newfound accessibility came with its own set of concerns. Critics began to worry that the centralization of media power could lead to bias, or worse, manipulation. This fear wasn't entirely unfounded, as governments and corporations were quick to recognize television's potential as a tool for shaping public opinion. Culturally, the media has always played a central role in defining societal norms and expectations. During the Cold War, for instance, Western media framed communism as an existential threat, while Eastern media portrayed capitalism as corrupt and imperialistic. These narratives were so pervasive that they not only shaped public opinion, but also impacted geopolitics on a massive scale. The media wasn't just reporting the story, it was part of it. By the 1980s and 1990s, the consolidation of media ownership became a growing concern. The once diverse landscape of local newspapers and independent broadcasters began to shrink as massive corporations bought out smaller outlets. Critics claim this created a system where a handful of powerful entities controlled the majority of what people consumed. This centralization fueled conspiracy theories about hidden agendas and the suppression of inconvenient truths. The advent of the internet and social media in the early 2000s promised to level the playing field, offering a platform for independent voices and alternative viewpoints. But instead of democratizing information, these platforms introduced new complexities. Algorithms, clickbait headlines, and targeted ads created echo chambers where users were fed content tailored to their beliefs, reinforcing biases and deepening divisions. All of this, the history of propaganda, the rise of centralized media, and the influence of digital platforms, has laid the groundwork for modern media conspiracy theories. Whether it's governments using the media to push their agendas, corporations shaping narratives for profit, or algorithms deciding what we see, the fear of manipulation isn't born out of thin air. It's the culmination of centuries of information control, now amplified in ways humanity has never seen before. One of the most striking claims tied to mainstream media manipulation is the idea that media outlets operate not as independent entities, but as instruments of larger, more coordinated forces. Advocates of this theory argue that what we see on television, printed in newspapers, or scroll through online is often less about informing the public and more about guiding it towards specific beliefs or actions. To support this, they point to a variety of compelling patterns, practices, and events that seem to suggest a coordinated effort to shape reality as we perceive it. A central argument revolves around media ownership. Critics often highlight how a small handful of corporations, sometimes referred to as the Big Six, control the vast majority of media outlets in the world. These conglomerates, they claim, prioritize their own financial interests, political alliances, and agendas over objective reporting. When a few companies dominate the narrative, the argument goes, it becomes easier to filter out dissenting opinions or inconvenient truths, creating a unified message that benefits those in power. Then there's the issue of messaging coordination. Proponents of media manipulation theories often point to strikingly similar language used across multiple outlets when covering major stories. A common example involves video montages of local and national news anchors repeating the exact same phrases, or framing stories in nearly identical ways. To some, this suggests that these outlets are operating from a centralized script, rather than producing independent investigative journalism. It's argued that this level of uniformity undermines the idea of media diversity, raising questions about who is truly deciding what gets said and how. Another key claim focuses on the relationship between governments and media organizations. Conspiracy theorists suggest that governments routinely use the media to disseminate propaganda, sway public opinion, and suppress opposition. Some cite leaked documents and whistleblower testimonies that allege collaboration between intelligence agencies and journalists. These collaborations are said to involve everything from planting fake news stories to controlling the framing of significant global events. The media, in this view, isn't just complicit. It's an active participant in shaping narratives to serve political interests. A related concern involves the influence of advertising and corporate sponsorships. Critics claim that news outlets are financially beholden to the companies that advertise with them, creating a conflict of interest that undermines journalistic integrity. Stories that might cast these sponsors in a negative light are allegedly downplayed or ignored altogether. For example, stories about environmental damage caused by major corporations or public health risks tied to certain products may be soft-pedaled to avoid upsetting powerful advertisers. Another thread often tied to these theories involves the use of fear as a tool of manipulation. Critics argue that sensationalized headlines and crisis-driven reporting are deliberately designed to keep audiences in a heightened state of anxiety. Fearful people, the theory claims, are easier to control and more likely to seek out the very media outlets that stoke their fears, creating a cycle of dependency. Whether it's the latest health scare, political scandal, or economic downturn, proponents argue that fear-based narratives serve both as a distraction and as a means of control. Perhaps one of the most controversial claims centers on the idea of hidden agendas. Proponents allege that certain topics, like government corruption, alternative health practices, or dissenting scientific opinions, are deliberately buried or discredited to protect entrenched systems of power. This claim extends to censorship, with accusations that major platforms and news outlets routinely suppress voices that challenge the status quo. These arguments, while compelling to some, are often dismissed by skeptics as a mix of circumstantial evidence and paranoia. But for those who believe the mainstream media is manipulating reality, The patterns and practices they see are far too consistent to be coincidental. For them, the question isn't if the media is influencing perception, but rather how far that influence extends. Critics of media manipulation theories are quick to point out that many of the claims rely on circumstantial evidence or leaps in logic rather than concrete proof. They argue that the media landscape, while far from perfect, is far too complex and decentralized for a single unified agenda to dictate every story, headline, or perspective. According to this view, the diversity of voices and platforms available, especially in the digital age, makes the idea of total control unrealistic. One of the first counter-arguments is that similarities in news coverage can often be explained by practical factors rather than conspiracy. News organizations, for example, rely heavily on wire services like Associated Press or Reuters for breaking stories. These services provide pre-written content that many outlets then adapt, which can lead to similar language or framing across platforms. Critics argue this isn't evidence of collusion, but rather a reflection of industry norms and efficiency in delivering the news quickly to a global audience. The question of ownership also gets pushed back. While it's true that large corporations control a significant portion of media outlets, skeptics contend that corporate interests are often driven more by profit than by ideology. They argue that media companies prioritize audience engagement to drive revenue, which explains the prevalence of sensationalism or fear-based narratives. This isn't about controlling the masses, they say. It's about getting clicks, views, and ad dollars in a competitive market. Skeptics also challenge the notion that governments wield undue influence over media narratives. While acknowledging that propaganda does exist, they argue that the free press and whistleblowers act as powerful checks on governmental power. Investigative journalism, they claim, routinely exposes corruption, holds leaders accountable, and challenges official narratives. Pointing to stories that uncover scandals or criticize those in power, critics suggest that a truly controlled media would never allow such reporting to see the light of day. When it comes to accusations of censorship, skeptics often push back with the idea that platforms and publishers are entitled to set guidelines for content. They argue that removing misinformation or harmful narratives isn't about silencing dissent, but rather about maintaining credibility and protecting public trust. For example, when stories are flagged as false or conspiratorial, critics see this as a safeguard against the spread of disinformation, rather than an attempt to suppress alternative viewpoints. Critics also address the claim that advertising influences content. While they don't deny that advertisers hold sway in certain cases, they argue that this influence is limited by the diversity of funding sources. Media companies today often rely on a mix of subscription models, grants, and independent sponsorships, which reduces their reliance on any single advertiser. This diversification, they argue, mitigates the risk of editorial bias. Another major critique comes from social scientists who suggest that conspiracy theories about media manipulation often arise from cognitive biases rather than actual evidence. Humans, they argue, have a natural tendency to seek patterns and assign intent to complex systems, even when none exists. The idea that everything happens for a reason can be comforting, especially when faced with a chaotic world. But critics say this tendency can also lead to oversimplifications and unwarranted suspicion. Finally, skeptics caution against the dangers of focusing too heavily on media manipulation theories. They argue that such beliefs can erode trust in journalism altogether, making it harder for people to discern fact from fiction. While acknowledging the media's imperfections, critics maintain that it remains an essential institution for democracy and an informed society. By focusing on flaws without acknowledging its benefits, they argue, the narrative becomes one-sided and ultimately counterproductive. For every claim of collusion or manipulation, there's a counterpoint grounded in pragmatism or industry realities. But even these explanations fail to satisfy those who believe the media wields an unseen influence far beyond what most people imagine. The idea that mainstream media manipulates reality doesn't just linger at the fringes of public discourse. It has a profound cultural, political, and social impact. These theories often resonate with people because they tap into deeply rooted feelings of distrust, disconnection, and powerlessness. For many, they provide a lens through which to understand not only how the world works, but also why it feels increasingly divided and chaotic. On a cultural level, the belief in media manipulation has given rise to a growing skepticism of authority. This extends beyond traditional news outlets to include politicians, corporations, and even academic institutions. People who subscribe to these theories often feel that they've been lied to repeatedly, creating a hunger for alternative narratives. This has fueled the popularity of independent media platforms, podcasts, and citizen journalism, which many perceive as being freer from corporate or political influence. The rise of these alternatives has reshaped how people consume information, fragmenting audiences into echo chambers, where their beliefs are reinforced rather than challenged. Politically, these theories have enormous implications. In democratic societies, trust in media is foundational to informed decision-making and public debate. When people believe that the media is systematically manipulating reality, it can erode the very fabric of democracy. Voters may distrust election coverage, question the motives behind policy discussions, or dismiss important issues as mere propaganda. This mistrust can lead to voter apathy, radicalization, or even political instability, as factions form around competing versions of the truth. On the other hand, the belief that the media manipulates reality has also empowered grassroots movements. Activists often use these theories to highlight systemic biases, whether they involve race, class, or ideology. For instance, some argue that mainstream outlets prioritize stories that serve elite interests, while ignoring or downplaying issues affecting marginalized communities. This perception has sparked movements to demand more diverse voices in journalism, greater transparency in reporting, and a reckoning with how media shapes public opinion. Socially, these theories have created a sense of division. Families, friends, and communities can find themselves at odds over which media sources are trustworthy. Debates about fake news or media bias often devolve into broader disagreements about worldview and identity. For some, trusting mainstream media aligns with believing in institutions and expertise. For others, rejecting it is an act of defiance against perceived corruption or elitism. This polarization makes it increasingly difficult to find common ground or engage in meaningful conversations. At a psychological level, these theories provide a sense of agency and understanding in a complex world. If the media is manipulating reality, then uncovering that manipulation offers a sense of control. It becomes a way to make sense of tragedies, political upheavals, and societal shifts that might otherwise feel random or overwhelming. The idea of manipulation also shifts blame away from individual choices or systemic complexities and places it squarely on an identifiable entity, whether that's the media itself, shadowy elites, or government agencies. Finally, the resonance of these theories speaks to a broader cultural anxiety about truth in the digital age. With information flowing constantly, people are bombarded with conflicting narratives, making it harder than ever to discern fact from fiction. In such an environment, the idea that the media could be manipulating reality becomes both plausible and deeply unsettling. This anxiety reflects a larger societal struggle to define what truth means in an era of infinite information.
Not all meals are created equal. For instance, breakfast has the spicy egg McMuffin for a limited time, and lunch doesn't. McDonald's breakfast comes first. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
If the idea of mainstream media manipulating reality feels unsettling, the speculative and fringe angles tied to this theory take it to an entirely new level of intrigue. These perspectives push beyond the boundaries of conventional narratives, diving into concepts that are as compelling as they are controversial. One of the more speculative claims is the idea that media manipulation isn't just about bias or selective coverage. It's about engineering entire realities. Proponents of this angle argue that mainstream outlets don't merely influence public opinion, they actively construct it. Through repeated messaging, emotionally charged language, and carefully curated visuals, the media creates a collective narrative that shapes how people perceive the world. According to this view, reality itself is fluid, molded by those with the power to control the flow of information. It's not just about what stories are told, but how they are framed, timed, and amplified to evoke specific reactions or behaviors. Then there's the claim that the manipulation goes beyond human influence entirely. Some theorists suggest that artificial intelligence plays an increasingly significant role in shaping the information we consume. Algorithms decide which stories trend, which posts go viral, and which headlines are pushed to the top of search results. This technological influence, they argue, operates in ways that most people don't understand, making it a powerful tool for manipulation. The question then becomes, who controls these algorithms, and what agendas might they serve? For some, this speculation leads to the idea of a digital panopticon, a system where everything you see, read, and believe is subtly curated by forces operating behind the scenes. A more fringe theory posits that media manipulation is part of a larger psychological operation, or PSYOP, designed to keep the population in a state of fear and compliance. In this scenario, the media acts as an instrument of control, perpetuating a constant cycle of crises, whether political, environmental, or social, that keep people too distracted or anxious to question the deeper power structures at play. Proponents of this idea often point to the concept of problem-reaction-solution, where those in power manufacture problems, provoke a public reaction, and then offer pre-designed solutions that consolidate their control. Some take this a step further, speculating that the manipulation extends to subliminal messaging. According to this angle, hidden cues in broadcasts, advertisements, and even entertainment programming subtly influence behavior and thought patterns. These cues are designed to make people more docile, more consumer-driven, or more willing to accept the narratives being presented. Whether through symbols, frequencies, or linguistic patterns, the claim is that these hidden elements condition the public on a subconscious level. There's also the theory that media manipulation is tied to larger, more esoteric agendas, such as preparing humanity for a one-world government, or even contact with extraterrestrial beings. In these scenarios, the media is seen as a tool to acclimate the population to certain ideas or norms over time, whether it's through the portrayal of global unity, the normalization of surveillance, or the frequent depiction of alien contact in entertainment. Believers argue that these patterns are not coincidental, but part of a carefully orchestrated plan. These speculative angles may feel far-fetched to some, but to others, they represent the logical extension of a system that wields enormous influence with little accountability. By exploring these unconventional ideas, we venture deeper into the labyrinth of media manipulation, where the lines between reality and illusion blur even further. The release of the so-called Twitter files added fuel to the fire for those who believe mainstream media manipulation is just the tip of the iceberg. These internal documents, emails, and communications leaked or disclosed by insiders at Twitter appear to showcase an unsettling relationship between social media platforms, government agencies, and even traditional media outlets. For conspiracy theorists, this trove of information is proof that the flow of information is far more controlled and censored than most people realize. The documents allegedly reveal instances where government entities requested the suppression of certain content, often under the guise of combating misinformation. These requests ranged from removing tweets and banning accounts to deprioritizing particular topics so they wouldn't trend. Critics argue that this represents a dangerous alliance between state power and corporate interests, a partnership capable of silencing dissenting voices and shaping public perception to align with official narratives. To some, this isn't just manipulation, it's outright control. One of the most damning aspects of these revelations is the suggestion that the censorship wasn't always ideologically neutral. Certain topics like election interference, vaccine mandates, and international conflicts were reportedly suppressed more heavily depending on the prevailing political climate. The argument is that instead of acting as an impartial platform for discourse, Twitter and other tech giants became de facto gatekeepers, curating content in ways that could shift public debate. This leads many to wonder, if this is happening on social media platforms, what might be occurring within traditional newsrooms? And it's not just Twitter. Similar accusations have been made against platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and even Google, where search algorithms allegedly prioritize certain viewpoints over others. Whistleblowers from these companies have come forward with claims of blacklists, shadow banning, and algorithmic manipulation designed to keep users engaged with content that reinforces particular narratives. For some, this is no longer a theory. It's a mechanism of control hiding in plain sight. Beyond social media, leaked emails and documents have also implicated mainstream news outlets in questionable practices. Some critics point to stories where journalists appear to have coordinated with government officials or private corporations to frame narratives in ways that serve specific interests. Whether it's giving airtime to a particular politician, burying stories that could damage reputations, or spinning complex issues into digestible sound bites, the concern is that the media serves not as an independent watchdog, but as an extension of power structures. The implications of these revelations are massive. For believers, the Twitter files and similar leaks expose a carefully coordinated effort to control not just what people think, but how they think. It's no longer just about misinformation or fake news. It's about the systematic shaping of reality itself. To them, these files serve as a wake-up call, forcing the public to confront uncomfortable questions about who controls information and to what end. Of course, critics argue that such leaks are often selectively framed to push their own agendas. They point out that the content of the files is sometimes ambiguous, with much left open to interpretation. But for those convinced of the media's manipulative power, the Twitter files are less of a smoking gun and more of an unmasking, a glimpse into a system that operates largely behind closed doors. As we draw this conversation to a close, it's clear that the topic of media manipulation strikes at the very heart of how we perceive the world. Whether through traditional outlets, social media platforms, or the shadowy alliances alleged in leaks like the Twitter files, the battle over information has never been more contentious or more consequential. For many, it's a war being waged on an invisible battlefield, with public trust and individual autonomy hanging in the balance. The idea that the media could be complicit in manipulating reality is as alarming as it is plausible. For believers, the evidence points to a carefully orchestrated system where narratives are shaped, dissent is silenced, and the public is steered toward conclusions that benefit an elite few. They argue that we are no longer simply passive consumers of information. We are participants in a game where the rules are hidden, the referees are biased, and the stakes are our very understanding of reality. It's a compelling thought, one that explains the growing distrust in institutions and the fracturing of public discourse. But even without fully buying into the conspiracy, it's undeniable that the media wields immense power. The stories they choose to tell, or not tell, shape public opinion, influence policy, and even sway elections. This influence isn't necessarily the result of a secret cabal. It could simply be the natural outcome of a profit-driven industry beholden to advertisers, political pressures, and a 24-hour news cycle that demands constant content. Yet to those who believe in deeper manipulation, this argument feels too convenient, too dismissive of the mounting evidence that paints a darker picture. It's easy to see why these theories resonate so strongly with people. The idea that we're being lied to, or at least that the truth is being filtered through layers of bias and agenda, taps into a primal fear of being deceived. And in an era where distrust in institutions is at an all-time high, where governments and corporations have been caught in scandals too numerous to count, is it really so far-fetched to believe that the media might be complicit in this web of influence? Of course, there's also a deeper psychological dimension to this. For some, these theories offer a sense of control in an increasingly chaotic world. If the media is manipulating reality, then the world's unpredictability isn't random, it's engineered. And if it's engineered, it can be understood, predicted, even resisted. Whether this is empowering or disempowering depends on the perspective. But either way, it adds another layer of intrigue to the question of who is truly in control. At the end of the day, whether you're a skeptic or a believer, the power of media cannot be ignored. Its role in shaping culture, politics, and public perception is undeniable, and perhaps that's where the real danger lies. Not in overt manipulation, but in the subtle, everyday ways in which reality is framed for us, it leaves us with a pressing question. How do we discern truth in a world where information is both abundant and carefully curated? Next time, we'll step beyond the realm of media and into the world of global economics, the Great Reset, an ambitious plan for a more sustainable, equitable future, or yet another layer of elite control. Thanks for tuning in to the Conspiracy Files podcast. We're here with brand new episodes every Wednesday. If you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, don't forget to follow us and be sure to rate, review, and share your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. You can also reach out anytime by emailing us at contact@theconspiracyfilespodcast.com. Until next time, and remember, the truth is out there. If you enjoyed this episode and want to dive deeper into the world of conspiracy theories, consider subscribing for exclusive access to the material they don't want you to hear. As a subscriber, you'll get banned episodes, episodes deemed too controversial for mainstream platforms, members-only bonus episodes, not available anywhere else, extended director's cut versions of your favorite episodes, early access to new content before it's released to the public, and much more. Thank you for your support. The link is in the description below. Join now.